Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Geek-Stew. And today, guys, welcome back to another episode of Conspiracy Theories with Ike. That's right. But it's not. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Today, we are doing Conspiracies Revisited. Now, as you may be able to tell from the title, we are revisiting a theory that I have already covered before from whether it be the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg or wherever else I got a theory from. But we are actually covering a theory that we have already covered before today. And I'll get into why we're recovering this theory, but we want to revisit theories sometimes when we gather more information, or perhaps we had something wrong, or something was left out of the original interpretation, or maybe I just didn't have all the information. So I have done a video on this previously, as I've already kind of covered. The theory that we're going to be checking out is God's ego death. If you've not seen it, check it out. Link in the description down below. This is one of my most popular videos. In fact, I think this is my most popular video, clocking in at a whopping almost 20,000 views. This is one of the ones that I created going on about 9 months or so ago, so keep in mind I had to very, very much refresh myself on what it was, but then also kind of reevaluate what it was that I was actually trying to talk about, in addition to the fact that the theory itself is very interchangeable. So let's get into it. Let's revisit God's ego death. So I covered this again, I've mentioned this already, 9 months ago, and I was kind of new to the whole conspiracy video thing, and I kind of found whatever information it was that I could about these theories, and there were times where I kind of ran into roadblocks, if you will. Now, a lot of people did take issue with my video about God's ego death, so if you did take issue with that, you're probably also going to take issue with this. With that being said, the concept that an entity of divine nature could experience a spiritual enlightenment, or that they were already not enlightened, could be considered blasphemous. I get that.
That's for blasphemy.
Now, again, I want to, because I kind of mentioned this before in the other video, but I don't really care, right? I'm not a theologian. I don't necessarily believe in, Abrahamic religions or God or Christianity per se. This, of course, is very much a Christianity-based theory, so I understand how that might come across as kind of negative. But basically what I'm getting at is that I don't want you to take to the comment section and call me out for being a blasphemer or whatever the hell it is you want to call me. Just take into consideration that this is just a theory about something, okay? Doesn't have to be a thing unless you make it a thing. That being said, I do need to talk more about what ego death is in order to more flesh out what I believe to be my actual theory regarding the concept of God's ego death. So let us start by revisiting the concept of an ego death. So to preface this, I have researched this before, but I wanted to kind of research it more and actually understand it, because when I did this video originally, I didn't really understand it, right? Thus the reason why I wanted to revisit, because I felt like I was missing something that was important. So having done some information and some research and gathering, we need to kind of describe ego death in two parts. What is ego and how does it die? So in order to understand ego, I think most of us do, but a real easy definition is that ego is a sense of self that is developed at a young age. As well, the ego relates to feeling about your own importance and abilities. Someone who is incredibly egotistical might think highly of themselves or highly of what they can do or can't do, maybe potentially. And that kind of develops into a sense of self-worth and a self-evaluation that is very much externally expressed to other people. So pretty easy. I think we all kind of knew what that meant, but now we need to talk about how and why an ego can die and what it means if it does die, right? So long story short, ego death is typically a realization, and in a lot of cases cases an instantaneous realization at that. Basically, that we are truly not the things that we have identified with, and that the ego or sense of self that we have created in our minds is a fabrication. Basically, it's the concept that we basically say, okay, great, my ego is no longer a part of me, let's move forward. Having an ego death typically results in one of two things. This is obviously based on research. I'm sure that there are other outcomes or other versions of these outcomes, variations, if you will. But basically, having an ego death could mean a sense of peace and connectedness to the world, if you will. Or an ego death could be one of resistance. The ego resists its death, and the result is a detachment or disassociation with the people around you and with life. Now that we kind of know what an ego death is, we need to talk about how it happens, right? Now, I want to start off by saying that I do not condone anyone going on this path, because some of these ways that you take an ego death path is to do something that is illegal. So the four things that I kind of saw as sort of common is that, of course, psychedelics. Take some shrooms or something, and it could potentially trigger a self-realization and cause said ego death. Sound baths. Sound baths are a type of therapy, actually, that are used for other things, and the sound is supposed to sort of help you meditate in a way, which could, of course, then in turn cause an ego death, because you're coming into that experience and having that actualization and realization, right? Additionally, out-of-body experiences. Some people do have out-of-body experiences or experiences that are extraordinary in some way. That could cause an ego death. And then lastly, it can basically just happen without any external trigger. Basically, there are some people that just kind of, boom, ego death. Having that actualization, that realization that, man, I am not who I think I am. My ego is not this, blah, blah, blah. It is definitely something that, of course, can happen with no external trigger. Okay? Keep in mind, there is more to it than this. I am giving you a very general overview of the concept of ego death, because there is a lot that goes into ego death and how one attains this. Of course, I'm not going to condone the use of any illegal drug, but as a forewarning, a lot of sites do use psychedelics as a catalyst, if you will, for ego death. But with all of that out of the way, I now want to provide you my new theory, my new take on the concept of God's ego death. So the concept of God's ego death and my theory honestly don't have much to back them up, because ultimately, if I was an all-knowing and all-powerful and omnipotent God, and I did in fact go through some form of enlightenment, that does infer that I was inferior to what I am now. So that means that there's some form of catalyst or evolution that I went through, and that, of course, wouldn't be good for the brand. So keeping that in mind, there's not a whole lot to compare this to. I think that there's some maybe context clues that kind of alluded to the whole concept of God having some form of a spiritual awakening or further evolution, right? Of course, we're talking about the biblical God from the Bible. If you've never read it, it's great.
Have you read the Bible?
Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. What's it to you?
Can you read, my son?
Well, that depends. Can you go fuck yourself?
But again, keep in mind, I'm just offering this as an interpretation of God's mindset throughout the Bible and how it's changed, okay? So we have to basically look at two versions of God. You have to look at the pre-ego death and post-ego death, and maybe even a during ego death. And we'll kind of talk about that in a second. So in Genesis, right, the wonderful book of Genesis, I talked about this actually in my last theory, the wonderful book of Genesis, we see that God has a falling out with Adam and Eve, casting them out of the Garden of Eden because of the whole forbidden fruit thing. Again, I'm not going to dive into that too much, but with that in mind, God may have regretted that decision and set out on a personal journey of self-reflection. Maybe acting out of haste in that situation set him on that journey. Maybe it didn't. Maybe something else set him out on that journey. But I want to infer that he did in fact have a brush with ego death, but his ego fought against it. You're probably thinking, what do you mean? God is perfect. He would just go with the flow, right? Wrong. My theory is that God had a brush with ego death. He fought against it. His ego fought the death And instead of going with the flow and becoming better for it, he became detached and disassociated with his creation. Now, if you're not seeing where I'm going with this, this could rationally explain why God would suddenly do something like, oh, I don't know, wipe out the whole fucking earth with a flood for absolutely no fucking reason. And here's the reason. Or here's the thing. I'm not here to debate this, okay? So I don't want people jumping in the comments and being disrespectful. And here's the reason why I'm saying this. If anyone can say to me with a straight face that there is good reason to flood the entire earth, kill everyone on earth because people bad, that's not true. That's ridiculous, okay? You're telling me that the baby born yesterday is evil and deserved to die in the flood? Because that's what people seem to forget with the whole concept of the story of the flood, is that it didn't just kill bad people, it killed good people too. And for some reason, Noah and his family were decidedly the chosen ones, if you will. Anyways, I'm not going to get into that. That's a conversation for a whole nother day. But this could, of course, explain why a god or a otherwise somewhat benevolent being would just wipe everybody out one day. Maybe they were disassociating. Maybe they were detaching themselves from their creation because of their attempted enlightenment. So that's one explanation that I came to when I was researching this, because it almost makes sense.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
But we do see over time that God does start to soften up, becoming a more gentler God in the Bible. Now, not completely gentle. He still does some pretty fucked up shit after the flood and some other fucked up shit in the New Testament. But the whole story of Jesus is basically God giving us a second chance. So something would have had to have happened in order for him to have gone down that path. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, before I get to that, of course, what caused that ego death, something as monumental as a flood or other major events should or could or would be the cause of this. But something that we also want to think about is that, it could have just been a sudden realization, right? He could have just one day said, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be like this, and boom, ego death started that evolution. Now, to kind of circle back to the whole concept of Jesus being that second chance, right? God having his ego death, having his spiritual awakening, having his spiritual journey realized, and coming to the realization of ego death, basically saying that, you know what, I need to do better. You know what I mean? Ultimately, I think that if a spiritual being as of the magnitude of God, if he were to have an ego death, if he were to have this, again, spiritual awakening, I think that he would probably, again, become more gentle, more benevolent, as we see in the Bible. So, what made him want to suddenly and randomly become more gentle, right? What would cause him to just say, yeah, I'm just going to send my only begotten son, John 3:16, to die for your sins? Because John 3:16 is a great verse, honestly. Out of all the whole Bible, John 3:16 is a great verse. It has a very empowering and very affirming message of God's love for humans. But where did that come from? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to act like I know everything about the Bible, but it just kind of seems like almost at a whim, randomly, that God decided, I'm going to send Jesus to earth and give everyone a second chance. Because the God of the Old Testament was not huge on second chances. Thus, the fact that he flooded the entire earth, killing everybody, and he also literally wiped out entire cities at the blink of an eye because he could. Because he deemed it to be not what he wanted. Even though he gives us free will, as people like to argue, he would still make decisions that would infringe on our free will, such as wiping everyone off the face of the planet except for a handful of people. There's basically, it goes in circles, right? You can offer up some form of, I don't know, rationale or reasoning for why something happens, but it always kind of comes back full circle. So, in my opinion, the best way to explain why God suddenly had this realization to send his son to earth to die for our sins, to atone for basically what he created us to do, seems as if he had some form of realization that, hey, maybe what I was doing was not good. Maybe I need to have some form of evolution, some form of ego death, some form of spiritual awakening to become a better, more loving God. So take that for what you will, but that is my new take on the concept of God's ego death. So obviously I know this is going to ruffle some feathers. I can already hear the click-clacking of the people typing in the comment section, and here's the thing. I don't really care, okay? I did a lot of research, and I took into consideration a lot of different things when I was thinking about God's ego death. You know, I did a whole video about this 9 months ago, almost a year ago. And I took the time to pause, to reevaluate my thought process and my thinking, did additional research, and I sort of came to this conclusion that maybe the ego death was something that transpired over the course of time, because we see a very different God from the beginning, middle, and end of the Bible. And that sort of made me think that something must have happened in order to have gone that route. You know what I mean? It wasn't just a random thing. But yeah, basically in time, I just said, you know what? I'm going to take it upon myself to learn more about ego death. And then that gave me more to think about and more to theory about. So that's my theory. That's what I'm sticking with for now until I find more information. I'm sure somebody's going to go in the comment section and bitch and moan about what I said about God and religion and Jesus and all that other stuff. And that's fine. Just know that it is what it is, man. So yeah, all of that in mind, God's ego death, it's one of those theories I think about daily, honestly. It's something that it's just kind of etched into my mind. I constantly think about God's ego death. It's a theory that I think I'll probably think about for a long time, and maybe I'll revisit it again in the future. Maybe there will be a part 2 of God's ego death revisited. Who knows? But I guess this is sort of my official part 2 of the original God's ego death video, where I've sort of given a further realization of what happened. I know last time I talked a lot about like Sodom and Gomorrah and what if God was the angels that were in Sodom and Gomorrah, but I realized that, you know, whether or not that's true, whether or not that's possible, who knows? So, anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. Check out the original God's ego death video. Links are in the description below, of course. And if you are interested in any of my other offerings, conspiracy theories videos, horror videos, whatever else, check out the rest of the channel. And again, give us some likes. Give us some comments, whatever you want to do. But with all that being said, I am going to get out of here. I have a lot of other stuff to do, a lot more videos to plan and film. I have 2 more videos that I'm getting ready to film and upload for the following weeks because I am moving soon. I've talked about this a bunch, but yeah, I'm getting everything pre-uploaded so that way I will be good to go while I'm moving. And I will probably get out some other form of video after I move. So just for a point of reference, just in case anyone's curious, the video I'm filming today will be for the 15th, and then the other 2 videos will be for the 22nd and the 29th. My next video that I'll actually be filming and putting up that's not already going to be pre-filmed and everything will be for May 6th. That will probably be a video about my move to Florida. I'll probably be putting up more of a vlog type video to kind of show you what I've documented of my move, if I decide to do that. If not, you'll probably just see just a video about some other theory that I come up with. And then we'll be back to just kind of doing whatever else I want to do. So, with that in mind, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay awesome. We will see you in the next one. See ya.